There is a predator patrolling nearly every coastline on Earth, one capable of launching its entire body out of the ocean at 25 miles an hour to strike a seal from below, biting down with more than 18,000 newtons of force, enough pressure to crush bone on contact. Its documented prey includes seals, sea lions, dolphins, and whales weighing well over 1,000 kilograms, taken down by an animal that can grow past 20 feet and 4,000 pounds. Yet, out of the billions of people who enter the ocean every single year, this animal is responsible for only 3 or 4 confirmed human deaths worldwide annually. Why would a predator capable of ending a human life in a single bite be responsible for so few of them? The answer traces back to one specific place the truth about this animal first started to unravel, and it will change how you see every beach you have ever stood on. That place was a movie theater in the summer of 1975. But before getting there, the actual scale of the gap needs to be understood in full, because the 3 or 4 figure is not an isolated statistic. The Florida Museum of Natural History has tracked bites worldwide since the 1800s, and the current 5-year average across every shark species combined sits at roughly 65 confirmed unprovoked bites globally per year, with an average of 8 total fatalities from all species combined. Great whites account for a larger share of those fatal bites than any other species, roughly 30% of the global total, which is precisely where that 3 to 4 figure comes from. In the United States, the Florida Museum calculates the odds of an individual dying from a shark attack at roughly 1 in 4,300,000. For comparison, drowning alone kills more than 4,000 people in the United States every single year, a figure that dwarfs the global shark fatality count by a wide margin, and lightning strikes kill roughly 20 to 30 people annually in the United States alone, according to National Weather Service data. You are statistically far more likely to be killed by lightning or even by a domestic dog than by a great white shark. That gap between the data and the reputation did not build up gradually over decades of documented attacks. It was manufactured almost overnight by one specific piece of fiction. In 1974, author Peter Benchley published a novel called Jaws, and the following year, Steven Spielberg turned it into a film that became the first movie in history to cross $100 million at the domestic box office, reshaping how an entire generation of moviegoers thought about the ocean. The shark in that story is depicted as deliberately hunting and killing beachgoers out of predatory malice, actively targeting a specific fictional town called Amity across the length of an entire summer. That portrayal became the dominant cultural image of the species almost overnight, and its real-world consequences were immediate and measurable. In the years following the film's release, recreational shark fishing tournaments surged in popularity across the United States and beyond, with anglers competing to land the largest possible shark, great whites included, as trophies, treating the animal from the film as something to be hunted down in real life. Both men most responsible for that image later disowned it in public, on the record, decades after the fact, once the actual research on the species had caught up with the story they had told. Peter Benchley told the London Daily Express in 2006 that sharks do not target human beings and do not hold grudges, adding that there is no such thing as a rogue man-eating shark with a taste for human flesh, and that in reality sharks rarely take more than one bite out of a person because humans are lean and unappetizing to them. Benchley went further elsewhere, stating that knowing what he knew by the end of his life about actual shark behavior, he could never have written that book the same way again, and that the environmental understanding of sharks simply did not exist at the time he wrote it. He spent much of the rest of his life, alongside his wife Wendy, working directly in shark and ocean conservation, writing articles for National Geographic and campaigning against the shark fin trade that was, by then, driving steep declines in shark populations worldwide. Steven Spielberg went further still, In a 2022 interview on BBC Radio's Desert Island Discs, stating plainly that he truly, and to that day, regretted the decimation of shark populations that followed the film's release, describing the wave of trophy hunting it inspired as, in his own words, a feeding frenzy of crazy sport fishermen. The single most consequential piece of shark media ever produced was built by two people who spent their remaining careers trying to undo its effect on how the public understood the species they had accidentally turned into a monster. If you are finding this interesting, be sure to subscribe to understand more about all species. That still leaves the biological question unanswered. If great white sharks are not hunting humans, why does the bite happen at all? The leading explanation is called the mistaken identity theory, and it stands in direct contrast to the deliberate, targeted predator depicted on screen. In 2021, it was tested directly, not just proposed, by a research team led by Dr. Laura Ryan at Macquarie University in Australia, publishing in the Journal of the Royal Society Interface. The team built a model simulating exactly what a juvenile white shark's visual system perceives, based on established neuroscience of how the species processes shape and motion at the surface. They then filmed seals, sea lions, swimming humans, and humans paddling surfboards from below in a controlled setting at Taronga Zoo using an underwater camera mounted to a scooter moving at a typical predatory shark's cruising speed. When that footage was run through the shark vision model, the results were unambiguous. From below, at the surface, the silhouette and movement pattern of a human swimming or paddling a surfboard was very difficult to distinguish from a seal or sea lion, the species' actual preferred prey. Ryan summarized the finding directly afterward, stating that white sharks are often portrayed as mindless killers fond of human flesh, but that this does not appear to be the case, and that humans simply resemble their food from the shark's visual perspective. She also noted, somewhat unexpectedly, that even swimmers without a board were difficult for the model to distinguish from a seal, contradicting the assumption that only surfboards created the confusion. Juvenile and sub-adult white sharks, whose vision is still developing and whose hunting experience is still limited, are statistically the most likely to be involved in bites on surfers specifically, which fits the mistaken identity pattern precisely. The behavior immediately following the bite is the second half of the explanation, and it is just as well documented. Marine biologist A. Peter Klimley, who has spent decades studying white shark feeding strategy through bite-by-bite analysis of hundreds of eyewitness accounts and videotaped attacks on seals, proposes that the species behaves as what researchers call an energy maximizer. White sharks preferentially target prey with the highest possible fat content, because that fat is what fuels their large body size, their long migrations, and a metabolism that runs unusually warm for a fish, with recorded stomach temperatures well above the surrounding seawater. A seal or sea lion can carry 20 to 25% body fat, delivering an enormous caloric payoff in a single kill, enough to sustain a large shark for weeks between meals. A human body, by comparison, carries nowhere near that level of fat relative to size, and offers a far bonier, leaner meal for the effort involved. The dominant behavioral pattern researchers have documented in non-fatal bites is what the field calls bite and spit, or a test bite. The shark bites once, appears to assess the prey through the extremely sensitive nerve receptors packed into its mouth and jaw, and then releases and swims away without a second attempt, consistent with an animal that has just determined its target does not meet the caloric threshold worth pursuing further. Researchers studying this pattern estimate roughly 70% of unprovoked great white bites fit this test bite profile, a strikingly consistent number given how much variation exists across different regions, seasons, and individual sharks involved. Stomach content studies of white sharks caught in waters with regular human activity have found that identifiable human remains are essentially absent, further supporting that humans are not being sought out or consumed as prey in any systematic way. That single bite pattern also explains why most encounters, even the ones that make headlines, are survivable. A great white capable of biting through the skull of a seal is mechanically capable of causing catastrophic injury to a human in a single strike, yet the overwhelming majority of recorded bites result in significant but survivable wounds rather than fatalities, precisely because the shark disengages almost immediately rather than continuing what would be, in a genuine predatory event, a sustained and repeated attack lasting several minutes rather than a couple of seconds. The most serious outcomes in these cases typically result from blood loss during that single bite itself, not from a shark returning for a second or third strike the way it would with an actual seal. Bystanders and rescuers who enter the water to help a bite victim are very rarely bitten themselves. Another detail that fits poorly with the idea of a shark actively hunting anything human-shaped in the vicinity. This pattern is close to the exact opposite of how the species is generally depicted in film and television, where an attack is framed as a deliberate, sustained hunt rather than what the data actually shows. A rapid, investigatory bite followed by immediate withdrawal once the shark determines the target is not what it expected to find. Subscribe to not miss the next one. None of this means bites never happen or that the ocean carries zero risk, and shark researchers are careful not to claim that it does. Surfers remain the group most frequently involved in white shark bites, representing roughly a third of global incidents, likely because their silhouette on a board most closely resembles a pinniped from below, and because they spend extended time in deeper water near seal colonies, the exact habitat white sharks patrol for their preferred prey. Swimmers and waders account for a larger overall share of incidents, but a smaller share of serious outcomes, since they typically stay closer to shore in shallower water. Certain regions, including parts of Australia, South Africa, and California, see a disproportionate share of global incidents, specifically because they overlap with major seal and sea lion populations that draw sharks close to shore, sometimes within a few hundred meters of popular beaches. Time of day and water conditions matter as well. The large majority of unprovoked bites occur during daylight hours, and murky, low-visibility water appears to meaningfully raise the odds of a mistaken identity encounter, exactly what the vision modeling research would predict, since poor visibility gives a shark less information to work with before deciding to investigate a shape at the surface. Even within those hotspots, the underlying math does not change. The risk is real and regionally concentrated, but statistically small enough that global fatality counts remain in the single digits most years, a fact that sits almost impossibly far from the cultural image the species has carried for exactly 50 years running. Public policy has, in places, been slow to catch up with what the research now shows. Some regions still operate shark culling and netting programs originally justified by the same fear the 1970s novel and film helped cement in the public imagination, despite mounting evidence that these programs catch and kill enormous numbers of non-target species, including turtles, dolphins, and rays, while producing only a marginal, contested effect on human safety. Meanwhile, the same great white population once treated purely as a threat to be culled is now, in many of those same regions, recognized as a protected species, critical to keeping seal and fish populations in balance across entire coastal ecosystems. What the data actually describes is an animal whose entire reputation rests on a work of fiction, rather than its documented behavior. A predator capable of killing nearly anything in the ocean that overwhelmingly declines to finish an encounter with the one species it was never built to hunt in the first place. 50 years of stomach content studies, tagging data, and now direct vision modeling all point in the same direction, and none of it resembles the animal that first swam across movie screens in 1975. The men who created the story responsible for that reputation spent the back half of their careers trying to correct it, one through decades of conservation writing and campaigning, the other through a public apology delivered on national radio nearly half a century later. And the shark itself, on the rare occasions it does make contact with a human being, appears to reach the same conclusion within seconds that its creators eventually did. This is not what I was looking for. And then it swims away, back into an ocean where it remains, by an overwhelming margin, dangerous to us than 50 years of movie screens have trained us to believe.